I kind of considered myself, you know, someone who knows about women's history and feminist history, and I'd never heard of the Mercury 13 group. Could you explain a little bit about these women?
So in the late 50s, early 60s, there were 13 women that qualified for astronaut training, basically. But the way this happened is there was a doctor called Dr. Lovelace, who was the head surgeon at the time at NASA, which is really just their head doctor. And so he'd done all the tests on the Apollo 7 astronauts and wanted to know how women would fare on the same testing. And so these tests involved like having very cold liquid put like syringed into your ears, edemas, blood test twice a day. They were actually quite severe compared to what we do now as testing for astronauts. This was considered far more difficult. So these 13 women qualified out of a list of 100 and passed the same tests that these men had. But what's quite sad about it is that when NASA found out that this was happening, because there was a media blanket over this testing because he was running privately, and these women had gone through divorces, like abusive partners, lost jobs just to do this testing they weren't paid for. They went, there's no place for women in space, which is interesting because it's already gendered before it had even happened. This place outside of Earth, there was no place for them. And not only was there no place for them, but unless they were like making breakfast was sort of the joke made by John Glenn on the stand when this went to court. And so NASA is sort of so now embarrassed of this history that it's really suppressed in their archives and not really acknowledged, despite the fact that these women could have been a part of that narrative.
Yeah, and it's so ironic because now we've got, you know, the sort of Katy Perry going to space. Just to space.
Yes.
There's this kind of like retroactive rewriting.
Girl power.
Yeah,
it's very like it's very first wave feminism. It's sort of like it feels very turf coded.
Yes.
Like the women we sent to space, they're these like cis divas.
Yeah,
They go into
and
space holding a daisy,
rich.
crying, kissing the ground when they come back. What I like about early space travelers is very cowboy. They were sort of, everything was so analog that you were sort of just building these things and going, hey, I reckon we should just shoot that into the sky with someone inside it. So the show is set around Wally Funk, who is a real woman. She's 86, never married, never had kids, and only has 2 televisions in her home, and they always play launches. And she waited 60 years to go to space. And I don't agree with commercial space travel, but she did go up in 2021 in one of those like Katy Perry's flight. But she waited 60 years for that. She's never had a student fail her like flight training. She's like remarkable woman in her own right. Drives without a seatbelt everywhere. She's crazy.
I love that.
All she ever wanted was this. So the show is set as if I have sent her up in the 60s. It's like a faux historical.
Yeah, I mean, part of the really incredible press release for this is this idea that you have reimagined a world where Wally Funk did go to space.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about the sculptures, the materiality of it, how this kind of historicism inspired the show.
So I think for me, when I was writing my practice dissertation in 2020 or 2021, I stumbled across these women and I was obsessed because I've always been interested in the space race and early space travel and the development of like the Russian rockets, et cetera. And it sort of just became a bit of a hyperfixation. I wanted to do this show for 5 years. And like when Whip Studios offered me the residency that ended in the show, I had proposed this and I knew it was going to be that. And part of that was I've never really made a sculpture. So I thought I have to at least make the command module. So essentially sort of using the landscape around us, I was allowing the materials in this area to influence the sculpture as I made it. So I was finding things or calling like the antenna company across the road for the spools that are on the top of the rocket.
Oh, gorgeous.
So I just spent a lot of time with these materials sort of building that up, and that's sort of how I became engaged with it.